Evaluate the expression. In our notebooks, we learned how to solve this problem by hand. Now we'll look at how to use a calculator. We'll need to use our subtraction key, which we'll use when we get to this point. We'll also need our negative key, which we'll use these 3 times. It's important to learn the difference between these two buttons. If you liked English class, you can think of a negative as describing the number the way an adjective describes a noun, whereas a subtraction is an action, so it acts like a verb. We'll also need our parentheses. So let's get started. To type the negative 12, we hit the negative key and 12 plus 4, subtract, open parentheses, negative 3, close parentheses, plus, open parentheses, negative 13, close parentheses, and hit equals. The result should be negative 18. And that's our final answer. Evaluate the expression. We're going to break this up into 2 steps. First, we'll look at the keystrokes for the top. Type the 9, subtract 2, open parentheses, negative 3, close parentheses, and hit equals. That gives us 15, so we write it up top. Now for the denominator. Type negative 27 divided by 9 plus 9, open parentheses, negative 3, close parentheses, and hit equals. And that gives you negative 30. So we write that on the bottom. Now we need to simplify. We have a positive over a negative, and our rule states that if the signs are different in a division, we get a negative. For the fraction, we can notice that 15 and 30 are both divisible by 15. 15 divided by 15 is 1. 30 divided by 15 is 2. So we get 1/2. We can use our calculator to help us with this, but recall that you cannot put a negative in the denominator with your fraction button. So we could start by doing the negative by hand, and then typing these keys to get the 15 over 30 reduced. Or, if you want, you can recall that a negative in the denominator is equivalent to putting that negative up in the numerator. So these keystrokes would give you a negative 15, and then the fraction button, and then the 30, and it reduces to the same quantity. And that's our final answer. Evaluate the expression. In your notebooks, we solved this problem by hand. Now we're going to look at the calculator steps. We'll need the parentheses buttons, the subtraction button, the negative button, and the exponent button. Let's take a look at the keystrokes. Start with 2. We have to raise it to the 3rd power, so we hit our exponent button, then the 3, subtract 3, and now notice you need to open up a bracket. We use the calculator's parentheses button to open up that bracket. Type the 7, open parentheses, 3 minus 8, close parentheses. Then subtract, open parentheses again, 5 minus 12, and close parentheses. Notice that I'm pointing at the parentheses we just closed, but there's also the bracket that needs to be closed. So you hit close parentheses 2 times in a row. Finally, you hit equals, and the result is 92. And that's our final answer. Evaluate the expression for the given values. To begin, we'll rewrite the expression with parentheses where the variables were so we can substitute. The question gives us the values for x and y, with x being -3. We have an x up top, so we substitute in -3. There's another x on the bottom, so it's also -3. Next, it tells us that y is -5. We have one location for y, so we substitute -5 in. In our notebooks, we followed the steps for simplifying this by hand. Now we'll look at the calculator steps. We'll do the numerator separately from the denominator. So we begin with the 7. And now look at this expression that I've circled. We'll type open parentheses, followed by the negative key, then the 3, then close the parentheses. Next, we subtract 9, and then equals, which gives us -30, so we can write that up top. Now for the denominator. We start with the 5, open parentheses, the negative button, 5, close parentheses, plus, type the 3, and then open parentheses, type -3, close the parentheses, and hit equals. That gives us -34, so we write it on the bottom. And now we need to simplify. Notice that there's a negative over a negative. Our calculator, if we go to use it to help us simplify, does not allow for negatives in the denominator. So it's best that we remember a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we'll simplify that on our own. But recall we don't have to write the positive, so I'll erase it. The keys are typing 30, the fraction button, 34, and then equals, which gives us 15/17. And that's our final answer.